Hey guys, welcome back to Winding Road Magazine. I am Tedward, and this is an Acura TSX, wait for it, wagon. Yeah, these are really cool. This is kind of like the car guy's wagon, or like the cheap car guy's wagon, because most of us can't afford to go out and get our dream wagons like the RS6 or the E63S. But back between 2011 and 2014, Acura made a wagon version of the TSX. So mechanically, this is a Honda Accord, almost entirely front to back. But in America, we don't get Accord wagons, so they gave us the TSX wagon. And this is ultra usable. They didn't give us everything they could have given us though, because they only allowed this car to come in a 4-cylinder and a 5-speed automatic. We'll talk about that more when we get in and take it for a drive. But first, let's just talk about its practicality. First, it looks amazing. Maybe if you're gonna detail it, you'd black out the chrome, but let's start off with the reason you bought the car. Loads of space. This one's actually my dad's car, and he is terrible at washing cars. This car is filthy. I apologize. You can call him out in the comments, but he does maintain it mechanically very well. So what you notice, you've got tons of space back here, and this is funny. He doesn't wash the car, but he leaves on the blue protective plastic over the metal bits. But anyway, you'll notice it has a Volkswagen cargo protection system. That is because he replaced his Jetta Sportwagen TDI during Dieselgate with this very car. He absolutely loved his Jetta. It was heartbreaking when he had to get rid of it, and he needed another wagon. He refused to buy an SUV. He really just wanted a wagon. So this was the logical next step. That's what I recommended to him. And we managed to find a good one. Inside, if you're used to any Accord or anything like that, pretty straightforward. Super spacious. Lovely leather. Honda always does a pretty good job of making a quality interior. This car cost about $34,000 when it was new. And they've held value pretty well. I'm sure you can find different realms depending on year and miles, but they're not cheap. It's a bummer that they discontinued this. It's kind of surprising they did, because it didn't sell terribly. They sold about 10,000 of them over the course of the years they made this. But we've got like great space for everything. This car is like just full of cavernous placeholders for things, and I had to go through it for a little while to make sure that when I do my brake testing, we don't have things flying around. Coming from BMW and Porsche land, that's kind of like where my knowledge lies. This is a little weird for me. So first of all, you'll notice the gauges. They're not mounted in the middle, they're floating. So that means they're mounted around the bevels. That's kind of funky. And the shifter, let's see if we can get a good angle on this. When you shift it, you pull it up. So it's an up and then back. See that? It's very weird, because I'm used to like pushing forward. That's very strange to me. But anyway, let's hit the road. This is illegal, but I'm gonna do it because school is closed. Not full throttle, but we're gonna talk about the engine. It's a little underpowered. This is the K24 Z3. It's very similar to the engine that you would have gotten in the Honda Civic Si, but not quite, I believe, and the Honda people can sound off on me below, because I don't know enough about them. But I believe the head is different. This is definitely tuned more for, I think it just has intake VTEC. I'm not sure if it has exhaust VTEC, but it's definitely tuned more toward efficiency than toward power. It only has about 201 horsepower, and that's where They could have made a real special car if they allowed this to have that V6 with 280 horsepower and a manual gearbox. Now, even if they didn't give us that 280 V6, we could have just had a manual gearbox in the 4-cylinder. I think that would have made this car really cool. The gearbox is good, but it's definitely an old school torque converter automatic. It's programmed well, so when I ask for power, it gives it to me pretty much immediately. But what I don't necessarily like about it is that the shifts aren't that smooth, which is fine. It is fine. I'm actually not going to complain about that. It's a Honda. I'm okay with that. We don't need everything to be like a perfect 8-speed ZF. It's okay to have a little bit of lag. What I do like about this car is that this chassis is so rigid. It's actually really nice to toss around. Great turning radius. This is just such a practical family grocery getter that's also, like, if you're a Honda guy, this is the car you have to haul your family around. We're in drive mode. There is an S mode, I assume that's for sport. That will allow you to hold your gears when you use the paddles. So hit second here. So it's geared fairly long. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but you know, you can kind of exploit it and you still get like a reasonably nice top end. Not much torque steer. The only time you notice any kind of feedback through the wheel is when you're mid-corner and you're really on it. There's not a whole lot of torque to steer the wheels, so pretty much just drives. But you do get a lot of nice feedback. This is a lovely car, and if you're used to Honda steering, this is exactly what you'd anticipate. If you used to drive like Acura CLs or TLs or Accords, this just feels exactly like that, except it has a nicer on-center feel than I think the previous generations. The previous generations, especially like the CLs, they tended to have kind of like this middle ground that wanted to hold the wheel centered. This is a lot nicer. This is a lot more natural than that. There's absolutely no dead space in this throttle pedal. When you ask for anything, it starts going right then. There's no small lack of throttle. It's like if you touch that throttle pedal, something's happening. Let's do a little brake test. ABS engages pretty early, and that kind of concerns me. It's probably just because we're not on incredibly, street performance tires right now, but I would like to get a little more. You can certainly hear the tires making some noise, so that's likely the case, but it would be nice. I think some of these like normal sort of passenger cars, they engage ABS a little too early because they don't put any trust in the driver to deal with any sort of lockup. Because it's underpowered, you do notice, oh, there must be a cop ahead. Thank you, sir. because it's underpowered, you do notice, I was going to slow down anyway, we've got this cyclist. Because it's underpowered, you do notice that it's kind of gear hunting quite a bit. So, I'll get around you. Unless you were just being a really nice doobie and saying like, hey, slow down, there's a cyclist ahead. That is courteous. Let's head down here. Communication is key to being a good driver, a safe driver. Oof, these are some jumpy railroad tracks. If you had a Raptor, I think I might come here. But yeah, the lack of power in this 4-cylinder means that it's going to be hunting around for gears, and it's not terrible. It's doable, and I think if you're used to 4-cylinder eco cars, then this would not faze you in the least bit. But if you were just coming away from something that had a little more torque, or maybe you could ride out a gear without needing a downshift, then this would probably get a little bit annoying to you. And I'd imagine if you have this full out with passengers in the car, it's going to be even worse. Let's talk about what's great about this car. The seating position is phenomenal. I can get really nice and low in this cabin. There's a ton of room between me and this ceiling. I feel like there's lots of open space, and ooh, wide body, hello. We like that. That's a great color too. My biggest gripe about modern cars is that they've made things too complex. And there's a few cars that really break the mold on that. I think the Audi R8 has probably one of the nicest cabins, and everything's just simple. You only get the buttons you need. It's very ergonomic. Granted, there's a ridiculous display on the dashboard. But one thing I love about this car is that you get a volume knob. A volume knob! This is brilliant. And it's funny because in the Honda Civic Type R, it did not have a volume knob until the refresh, until the 2019, when people were like, this is so silly to have to swipe or press these buttons. It's nice to just have like a normal thing that you don't have to look for, you don't have to question, am I in the right spot? And we've banned cell phone use in so many places, and cars are far more complex than the cell phones that we're trying to avoid distracting us. And the less complex a cabin is, the safer the driving is going to be. I hate it when an Explorer has a roof rack. It just looks like a cop. Bumpy roads brings me to my next point about this car, is the suspension is so good. You can tell a lot of time and definitely money went into tuning and designing this suspension. We're in a position here where you've got a car that, you know, Honda tends to be fairly sporty, but it's also got to be a daily driver, and it absorbs this stuff so nicely, but at the same time, it settles into a corner really well. It's tough to make something that's both compliant and sporty, and Honda has done a great job with the Acura TSX. Dump it into sport mode. quarantine speeds are a little crazy. Driving on the highway in this car is really nice. Honda's always done a good job with cars to like kind of hang in. Well, not always. Let's just say like early 2000s and up. Hang into that kind of like 75, 80 mile an hour range and just enjoy. I mean, I'm at 2,500 RPM at 75 mile per hour, and that is a nicer engine cruising speed, a lower engine cruising speed than even my M3 in 7th gear. So kind of gives you an idea of the fact that that top gear, that 5th gear, that overdrive is really designed for fuel economy and allowing you to maintain a reasonable speed and still get reasonable fuel economy, and also not overwork that engine. And I know I'm kind of just gently passing on the right. It's a little less outrageous than me whipping across 3 lanes to go do their speeds. Plus, there's been cops out like crazy lately. I'm sure they are starting to pull people over. They're getting less and less afraid of interacting with people, that's for sure. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. If you'd like to see more from me, head over to my channel, Tedward Drives. That's going to do it for the day drive of the Acura TSX wagon.